So this slideshow is going to take an example of one part of your notes. In this case it's going to be the light and dark imagery, and we're going to look at how you might actually take a series of notes or an understanding of notes and actually use them and incorporate some of those notes into a paragraph in your work. The diagram here is summarized based on the work of Juliet McLaughlin. She's written a book called William Shakespeare's Othello or something like that, and the whole book discusses the play. She says that Iago's attack on Othello comes in 4 waves. The first 2 waves, Othello is sort of untouched by Iago, but in Act 3, which is the climax of the play, he becomes under Iago's influence, so much so that he kills his wife in Act 5. Now, you know that plot, and there's a scene-by-scene summary down the bottom of the diagram, and you can see that there's contrast in light and dark and day and night, inside and outside, and all that throughout the entire play. McLaughlin would really say that this play becomes more and more dark as it goes on. And we see that in Othello's language. So let's just track some of the things through that Othello says that sort of exemplify this lightness and darkness. Now in Act 1, we see Othello for the first time in Act 1, Scene 2. And although that quotation in red isn't the first line that Othello says, it's a very important one because it characterizes Othello as being a peacekeeper. You'll notice also the word bright, which is part of this imagery of light, and we see Othello is a sort of part of the world of light, and the word bright clearly reinforces that. Also, in Act 1, Scene 3, Othello is sort of unofficially put on trial in front of the Duke, and the Duke says, you know, your son-in-law is far more fair than black. So again, the language of lightness and brightness surrounds Othello. At the end of Act 1, Iago's attack fails on Othello, so he tries again. Remember, he wants to get Cassio's job, so he arranges for Cassio to get drunk and is provoked in a fight, and Cassio loses his position as lieutenant. In Act 2, though, Othello is still the peacemaker. He's saying to Desdemona there in that red quotation at the end of Act 2, Scene 3, all's calm, all's well, and let's go. So he's still untouched, he's still not been sort of dragged into the dark side of the force. But in Act 3, he is. Act 3, Scene 3 is, if you look at how Shakespeare structures his tragedies, is the climactic scene of the play. At the start of Act 3, Scene 3, Othello is not jealous. He is not under Iago's power at all. In fact, he dismisses it. He says, you know, away at once with love or jealousy. But by the end of Act 3, Scene 3, he has appointed Iago his lieutenant, and he has vowed to kill his wife. Before he does, he says that quotation there, arise black vengeance. And so you see that Iago has now influenced Othello so much that Othello starts using the language of darkness and blackness. So that's the end of Act 3, Scene 3. And finally, in Act 5, Scene 2, very obviously Othello put out the light and then put out the light. See, he's blowing out the candles so he can kill Desdemona in the darkness. So there are some quotations and some notes that you might actually have. Now it's all very well having that understanding. How do you write about it in an essay? So let's look at an example of that. I suppose it depends on what the essay question is. But let's assume the essay question is there in the box. Discuss the extent to which contrasting pairs of images are important. Now here's an example of an essay paragraph from that play. I beg your pardon, from that essay. An example of a paragraph. Read it and have a look at how the quotations are integrated into it, how those quotations are comprehensive and thorough. They're all from the previous slide. And how there's an integrated discussion of how the imagery reinforces the characters all throughout the entire play. You might want to pause this clip now and read that particular slide.